If your goal in ARK Survival Ascended is what's shown here, stay tuned because we'll discuss how to breed your creatures to such high levels that you'll have absolute OP creatures for bosses, raids, or just to show off. This new breeding tutorial is specifically for ARK Survival Ascended. It was recorded in November 2023, a few weeks after the game's release, so there might be future updates or changes to mechanics. If that happens, you'll find new tutorials in a pinned comment. You don't need prior knowledge to the breeding mechanic in ARK Survival Evolved for this tutorial. However, if you do have it, please check out the chapters I provided to skip or revisit topics based on your knowledge level. But if you're new to ARK, or you have little to no prior knowledge, please watch the tutorial entirely, as the information builds up upon each other. As some of you have asked me before how this data is collected, I'll give you a brief summary.
I went down to the archives and I started pulling some old files.
First, there was existing knowledge from ARK Survival Evolved breeding and how the mechanics worked here. Knowing that breeding wasn't entirely rewritten, this provided me with some clues. I then bred thousands of dinos with high breeding settings and extracted their data. 10 hours of this process were also live streamed on Twitch and people watched the data collection. Afterwards, this data was analyzed and evaluated using Python. Probabilities were figured out and initial theories were written down. These theories were then tested again in the game. And upon confirmation of the theory, simulations again in Python were written to test larger breeding quantities, avoiding the insanity of doing it manually. Next, the theories were sorted, summarized, and connected into groups and reworked to be useful for you, the players. In ARK Survival Ascended, there's a game mechanic where you can pair two animals of the same species to combine the good stats of each parent. But not just that. Very rarely, mutations occur, leading to the offspring having stats higher than those of the parents. Breeders in ARK Survival Ascended aim for these mutations to gradually increase and maximize the creature's stats, like the creature I showed you at the beginning. Breeding prepares you for the mid and the end game. However, it's crucial to look into breeding early on because it's one of the most time-consuming game mechanics. Setting up breeding groups early makes it easier later on, avoiding the need to wait for results. In ARK Survival Ascended, 3 different level values are stored for each stat your creature has. First, there's the base level value, which is the value your creature has at birth or after taming. The second value is the mutation level value, which is what we now call the mutation stack. These are the level points that your creature has acquired through mutations. The last value is the leveled value, which your creature gains when you level it up manually. All 3 values are stored separately. The base value and the mutated value can be inherited, but the leveled value cannot. Therefore, it doesn't matter if your creature is leveled up before you're breeding it. Currently, the base value and the mutated value carry the same weight, which means a base level increases the stats by the same amount as a mutated level. However, this might change in the future because that has already been announced. The total level of an unmutated creature is the sum of all of its base stat levels plus 1, because a creature without stat levels will always be level 1. If your creature also has mutations, these mutation levels are added to the levels. Therefore, mutated creatures are often higher in level than their parents, but not always. This can be very confusing initially because you can pair 2 creatures with the same level and then an offspring with a higher or lower level appears and you don't understand why. However, this is because the total level is just the sum of all stats and the baby recombines the stats of the parents. If it recombines all of the bad stats, then it will be lower than the parents. If it recombines all of the best stats, then it will be a higher level than the parents. In most cases, though, the offspring is somewhere in the middle, unless you have a lot of luck or a lot of bad luck. But before even thinking about mutations, you probably want to do gamma bosses, clear caves, or raid and defend in PvP. For these tasks, you will need creatures even before starting to mutate them. Combining high stats from different creatures is the best way to get early, strong creatures that can handle all of these tasks. And here is the process. Look for high-level creatures. On a server with a maximum wild level of 150, I would consider creatures from level 130 as high enough. For maps like the island, which have a very low rate of high-level creatures, I would start a little bit lower and then later swap creatures once you find better ones. The first problem you will encounter now is that you won't be able to see the stat points after taming, because the tool that displays these is unlocked by the Overseer Alpha. If you haven't defeated it yet and you do not have access to mods, we will have to determine the level points the old school way. Don't level your tamed creature until you have written down the stats. If you had a perfect taming efficiency, you can enter the stats on this page here. Our calculator works for tamed and unleveled creatures. The stat calculator that Dododex currently uses at the time the video is made is only for wild creatures before taming. Since both stats are calculated differently, you cannot use it for tamed creatures. If you want to breed on a larger scale and keep an overview over all of your creatures, software like ARK Smart Breeding will help you monitor your creatures. I personally use the software for all of my projects. So once you have your group of high-level creatures and manage to determine their stat points, it's time to combine the stats. Look at which creatures have high values in their different stats and pair them. Sometimes you might have the best stats on two females and you can't directly pair them. In that case, you will need to pass these values onto a male creature through mating and then proceed. This might take a few days, and having an Oviraptor ready to continuously keep egg-laying creatures mating will help you utilize this time a little bit more efficiently. But in the end, you will have a higher leveled and stronger creature than the parents are. While these combined creatures can get you through the early parts of the game content, they won't be able to defeat alpha bosses for you. To achieve this, creatures must be mutated, thereby getting higher stat levels. The most efficient way to do this is by having a group of females that have exactly the same stats and are unmutated. If you're using tools like ARK Smart Breeding, it's not important for them to have the same stats, since through ARK Smart Breeding you can always find out where the mutations are. However, initially it's better to have the same stats to easily compare differences between the parents. The number of females you need for your group depends on how high your breeding rates are. Whether you made one female 100 times or 100 females once, it has the same effect. The former just takes months on official, and the latter under an hour. However, I would say the slower your breeding rates are, the more females you need. Mutation stacking means stacking all mutations on one stat. This is usually done because after 20 mutations, the chance decreases from 7.3% to 4% to get mutations. To get as many mutations on one stat while still having the 7.3% chance, you only keep the mutations on this one stat and get rid of the others. However, some might wonder, why not keep all mutations? And this is because with each mating, you do not always inherit all stats, yet to progress, you must always have all stats and mutations on your main creature. The probability of having the mutations on the correct stack and being able to ignore all the other stats while mutation stacking is higher than inheriting all stats every time. Now onto the exciting yet complex part. If this section isn't immediately clear, don't get discouraged. Watch it 2 or 3 times and feel free to ask questions here or in Discord for better understanding. At the beginning, when I explained the different stat points, we talked about the 3 different values. For us now, the second stat is important, because these are the levels your creature gains when a stat mutates. With each mutation, it gets 2 additional levels on that stat. And these 2 levels are then added to the total level count. When you mate creatures, there is a chance that a random stat mutates and gets 2 extra levels on the mutation stack. That's what we call the second value that stores the mutation levels. You have no control over when it happens or which stat is affected. ARK does not favor any stat. It is all random. I did several test runs with aligned breeding in ARK Survival Ascended, and I found the following probabilities. If both parents have under 20 mutations, then the chance of mutating is 7.3%. This means out of roughly 100 pairings, slightly more than 7 mutations occur. If one parent has 20 or more mutations, then the chance drops to 4%, meaning in 100 pairings, only 4 mutations occur. This is because one parent cannot trigger mutations anymore. Due to these low probabilities, breeders often have many creatures in their bases, as mentioned earlier. Mutation stacks have some unique characteristics, and this part of the video is now also important for those who previously played ARK Survival Evolved and now want to understand why ARK Survival Ascended is different and, in my opinion, better than ARK Survival Evolved. The mutation stack behaves like its own stat, but not entirely, as it has some own behaviors. The highest mutation stack essentially only wants to stick around with the highest base stat. It doesn't care about the lower base stat. So if you have a creature with a low base stat, but mutations, and by chance you tame another creature with a high base stat, if the offspring inherits the new higher base stat, it will always get the mutation stack with it. And by the way, the chance to get this higher stat is a 55% chance, just like in the old ARK. If both parents have mutation stacks, one parent having more, the other parent having less, then the highest base stat will always get the highest mutation stack, and the lowest base stat will always get the lowest mutation stack. However, the exception occurs when both base stats are equal, and in that case, the baby won't always get the combination of the highest base stat plus the highest mutation stack, but it will have a 55% probability, because the game calculates it like this. It takes its own base stat and then adds its own mutation stack to it, remembering the sum. Then it takes its own base stat and adds the other parent's mutation stack, remembering the sum. After that, it takes the other parent's base stat and adds the first mutation stack and remembering the sum again. And then it adds the second parent's base stat with its own mutation stack, remembering the sum. So we have 4 values now. Then the game only keeps the highest and the lowest value and gives you a 55% chance to get the highest value. And this explains why with equal base stats, you don't always get the highest mutation stack, because there are only 2 values that could be in question here. What are the advantages of these mutation stacks? First of all, you do not need high base stats from the beginning, because mutation stacks can easily be transferred when you find a better stat. Which also means you can start mutating faster. In the end, you can have higher stats on the creature because ASA limits mutations alone and not the total number of points. This means, for instance, if you have 60 levels on your base stat, you can still have 254 mutations on top. In ARK Survival Evolved, 254 total levels on the stat was the limit. And now the best, even and odd values no longer make a difference because the game doesn't alter base values anymore. But are there also disadvantages to mutation stacks? First, without proper documentation of the stats, it's now way more difficult to determine which stat a baby has received. It's no longer either the mother or the father plus a potential new mutation, but it's the mother's base stat with a high or low mutation stack, with or without new mutations, and the same for the father's stat. Especially in the beginning, breeders need identical parents to avoid confusion. Breeding creatures should also not be imprinted to avoid confusion. And mutation stacks cannot be transferred to lower base stats. This could be challenging when maneuvering around the max level caps. Besides mutation stacks, we also still have the old mutation counter that restricts us. By the way, collecting all this data took several weeks and an immense amount of manual work. All our theories were tested in-game and thousands of dinos were hatched and their data recorded. Therefore, if this video has helped you, I would appreciate if you could leave me a small contribution on my Ko-fi. So now you're confused about all of my explanations and all you wanted when starting this video was someone to tell you how to set up a breeding group and how to start mutating. So if you don't care about all of these explanations, here's my quick wrap up on how to set up a mutation group. If you're still confused about certain things I'm explaining, just go back into the video and check for the explanation there. Or just hop into my Discord. First of all, we cannot avoid mutation stacking even in ASA. The setup is very similar to ASE, but a little bit more simplified. First, you choose the creature you want to mutate. Creatures suitable for farming, raiding, and boss fights are ideal. Find a male and a female and tame them with an as high efficiency as possible. The next step differs a little bit on whether you have a spyglass, binoculars, or ARK Smart Breeding, because if you do not have a way to see the stat points, mate the parents and keep all the babies that have higher or equal stats than the parents without having mutations. This way you can be sure you only combine the highest stat points. When you stop getting higher level babies, the highest babies are your new breeding pair. Mate them repeatedly until you have a set of identical creatures and keep only the females. These will be your breeding group. And if you get mutations on the desired stats during this process, set them aside because these can be your breeding creatures later. If you can see the stat points and mutation stacks, then simply just mate the first parents that you tamed until you have enough unmutated females to start your breeding group. They don't need to have the same level or the same stats because you can directly see what's mutated. Save any mutations you get on the way, as these will be your breeding creatures later. In ASA, it's still important to split your mutation lines. Don't mutate all stats on one male, but different males. Mate your male with all the females and wait to get a male with a better value in the stat that you want to mutate. Without a spyglass, it's crucial to not imprint any of the creatures because imprinting increases a stat, but doesn't pass on that increase. So you would not notice a mutation. If you have a creature laying eggs, I would recommend to have an oviraptor collecting all the fertilized eggs, just in case you need to go offline or you aren't always in the base. If you get a male with a higher value in the stat that you want to mutate, swap out your initial male with the new male until you get another mutation, so a higher value in the stat you want to mutate. If you get a female that gets the mutation stack and the new mutation, you breed her with an unmutated male until you get a male baby that gets the mutation stack, and that's gonna be your new breeder. Sometimes you can get mutations on the right stat, but you won't get the mutation stack with it. You will need to discard this offspring as mutation stack will not add together. Once you reach 20 mutations on your male, the rate at which you will get mutations will slow down. So you will only get mutations in 55% of the instances where you would have gotten them otherwise. Then simply increase the number of females. I usually double them. And then just keep mutating until you have as many mutations as you want. And in the meantime, you can combine stats or tame higher base stats and transfer the mutation stacks alongside. If you have a spyglass, you can also use the combined male with a higher base stat and mutation stack as the new breeding male. However, without a spyglass, I would advise against it because it could get too confusing. And that's basically it. Combine all of the stats and mutation stacks later. And this might take a little bit of time, but at the end, you at least have the guarantee that you will always get the highest stat and the mutation stack that comes with it. As a word of caution though, and this might change over time after this video, but it's a current issue and that's why I'm talking about. Many cryopod mods alter stats or add mutation counters without increasing the stats. Despite their convenience and their time-saving features, I wouldn't risk having cryopod mods ruin your creature at the moment. So remember that using cryo mods and baby claim mods at the moment are for your own risk. Unfortunately, I will not be able to provide help or support if your problem is caused by one of these mods. And if you have any further questions or you need help, feel free to go down into the comments or join my Discord, where either I or the amazing members of the community can help you out. Just to point something out because it has happened before, I won't be able to provide help through voice chat or take additional time out of my day to re-explain to you personally what I have covered in this video. Unfortunately, that would basically use up all of my time that I normally use to make these videos, so I hope you understand that. And if you want to know more about ARK Survival Ascended, then YouTube took its time to choose these two videos that are probably very interesting for you.